You are listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network.
وتكلم من هناك لشوارزنيجر
Ya lo hace, pierna derecha, directo al arco, golazo, 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 golazo.
This is Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio, your new live show about the beautiful game in all its glory, with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. MLS, EPL, La Liga, Champions League, all is fair game. Powered by the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us at sportspodcastingnetwork.com.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today. Duane Rollins, joined by myself as well, Kevin Laramee. Duane, we weren't together yesterday, and the big news happened last Friday night and the whole weekend. Everybody was talking about it, and it's the decision, or maybe lack thereof, in Division 2.
Yeah, look, it was a bit of common sense came down the pipe at the end, I think, Kevin. But is it a decision? I think it's a delaying the inevitable. I like the sort of the fact that this is a 1-year decision and they have to figure themselves out. I still think that some form of merger is really the only thing that's eventually going to solve this. I just don't know how those two business models can coexist. Then again, I don't know how the NASL business model can exist at all. So well, there you go.
Isn't it the most American thing to do? And here, bear with me for a second, our American listeners. Capitalism, in a way, it's the marketplace deciding and letting the customers and the dollar decide. That's what's going to happen in Division 2 now.
Yeah. Well, it's always ironic that the United States soccer system and all their professional sports system is socialist, really, and how it's set up. Especially look at the big four sports, and then the rest of the society is so based on such free market stuff. And then you look to Europe, which is usually the opposite, and their sports are entirely free market and pure capitalism, and they don't necessarily go the same way politically. But that's a discussion maybe for a higher brow podcast. For this one alone, we'll just say that in terms of D2. Look, it's a slug for anyone to make it in that level of the game, Kevin. It's not as cheap as people think to run those teams, and you don't. What's the easiest way a billionaire becomes a millionaire is that they run a soccer team.
Money loss, exactly. What I was saying yesterday is, in your big pocket, even though that pocket might not become empty, might be very deep, it's still annoying when a lot more comes out than comes in.
Well, precisely. Yeah. I mean, it's an ego trip for a lot of those guys, especially in the smaller markets, because a lot of them, they're big fish in small seas, right? Big fish, small puddle even. And so they run this soccer team, and that's their dream, and they'll end up spending more money than they can afford in it. And here we are, and you get into messes. Be very curious to see how Cosmos 3.0 runs next year. We'll be very curious to see how the NASL runs here. Jacksonville, of course, now being run by the league, just so they could hit their 18 mark too. Our Rayo is gone officially now. I mean, it's a revolving door, but I guess it's good in the sense that it does keep the Eddies afloat for another year. Hopefully they see the way to go to the Canadian Premier League after that. I continue to stress that. I understand that the Faiths have a lot of money invested in this league, but at the same time, if you were a major investor in the Titanic as it was sinking into the sea, do you not think that maybe if another boat came along that you'd jump into it? And that's kind of where I come down on that.
That's a fair point. Speaking of the boat, NASL as well has mentioned that for 2018, 3 new clubs might join the league in San Diego, Orange County, California, and drum rolls, please, Atlanta. Silverbacks are back, maybe, Duane?
Yeah, look, that seems like a poor idea, but you never know. And this is the idea. It's a Peter Wilt's thing that he believes that the markets in the United States can support multiple teams. And I don't necessarily disagree with Peter. We should have him on again soon, by the way. But I don't necessarily disagree with his evaluation there. I just don't know whether these markets can support multiple teams in different levels. We've seen this time and time again. The old ad, like it's not apples to apples when you're talking Major League Soccer versus these levels in terms of the attention they get. And you can complain about that, and you can lament the fact that that's the case out there if you're an NASL fan. But the reality is it's a challenge. It's a challenge you have to overcome if you're going to try and have a successful second market team. It's the same challenge that the Canadian Premier League teams, when they launch up here, are going to have to face when they're up against those MLS teams in the three major cities. And that's why I think you're going to see them slightly position themselves in a way where they're identified as something slightly outside the major cities. Nonetheless, it's something that you have to get over, Kevin. And we'll see. Atlanta, it wasn't a great NASL market before. It's turned out to be what's looking like a pretty good Major League Soccer market, very similar to Toronto that way. Do you think that, I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, because I think about it from the Toronto analogy. And again, I think it's fair because, the Lynx weren't supported at all. But yet TFC launched and they were massively supported, which seems like the exact same thing playing out in Atlanta. I think a few years into that had you started, restarted the Lynx up at the same level they were before, they would have found a bigger audience than they had before. So maybe the Silverbacks can do the same.
And last little tidbits of information I wanted to talk to you about that came out later yesterday in the day after the show. Bill Peterson, we've talked about it last week, but now it's official. They have mutually agreed to part ways amicably. And Bill Peterson will not be the commissioner of what seems to be an ASL 3.0. What are your thoughts on Bill Peterson's tenure over the last 4 years?
Yeah, I have nothing against Bill Peterson, and I have nothing against the NASL. They've always actually been quite good to us. So I'll start with that. But I do think that when you look at the overall direction that league took under his leadership, and you start to look at sort of the more aggressive stances that they took in terms of how they position themselves in markets, how they position themselves in the soccer landscape, how they position themselves to be sort of this hyper-competitive alternative to Major League Soccer without trying to coexist in some way. I think ultimately, if you're going to take that kind of position, that you're going to damn well need to have the resources to win. And they didn't. And that's playing out now. And the mess that we're seeing now, I think, is largely to do with how they position themselves in a lot of different ways. And you have to go at the buck stops at the top, right? And the commissioner, I think changing him at this point might signal a understanding by those in NASL circles that they need to soften a little bit where they stand if they're going to survive. I say this sincerely. I do hope that there is some form of level of football within the United States pyramid that does continue to exist, that is maybe called the NASL, or maybe it's part of a USL NASL merger that's split into tiers or whatever, but something that's a little bit in between what USL is now and MLS. But I want that level to recognize what it is, and thrive. I think they can thrive if they recognize what that is and they work to be the best at that level without trying to be more than they can be. And I think that as long as Peterson was in charge, that was never going to happen. That wasn't his MO. That wasn't the MO of the league. And now that maybe some of these owners that were a little more aggressive are moving away, that maybe the NASL can find its niche. And maybe that requires a name change or a branding change as well, but we'll see. Certainly, though, I think it was the right move at the right time to part ways as they did.
I think the decision that's been made public last Friday is going to be it's a forced one, yes, but it's going to be the start of a better relationship between the two Division 2 leagues because, well, they won't have a choice. Eventually, it's soccer circles only that big, and now we're in the same division for a lot of things are going to start to be a little more easy to do, hopefully, in 2017 between the two leagues. That will lead to maybe in 2018 something different because it's a provisional sanctioning for 1 year. For the future, we'll see. And 30-team USL, 8 teams NASL in Division 2. What's that going to mean for the Lamar Hunt US Open Cup with the MLS 2 sides in USL? We'll have more details in the following months.
Yeah, and look, we've said it over and over again. I like that tiered system idea that merges those two levels together. And I understand that their business models are different, but I do think it's workable in the sense that you have teams that are going to be a little bit more ambitious than others and let them sort themselves out. And it would be a trial in a way, to having some from a pro rel eventually down the line, because you're not ever going to get to the ultimate dream that some of these people have. You're not going to get there soon, and you're never going to get there if you don't try it at a lower level first. And that was always kind of our one little complaint about the NASL, is if you so badly want pro well, then create it. You have a level below you. You could allow them to try and promote themselves into your league, and you could expose your clubs to being relegated. I think having like I said, a semi-open model, which is sitting there right there, and it's pretty obvious to anyone that looks at it. And it would separate, it would allow teams like TFC2 to continue to do what they want to do, or they're TFC2 still, trying to mix up that in their TFC3, which is, by the way, playing in the most prestigious U tournament in the world starting next month, which is an interesting little tidbit, but nonetheless, it would just sort of allow those teams to sort themselves out and find their level and still coexist. In terms of the U.S. Open Cup, I think the answer is pretty simple. The two teams aren't going to be in it. They weren't in it this year, and the non-two teams will be. So away we go.
All right, just before we take the break and we start to talk about the World Cup, because, hey, we will have 48 teams in the World Cup starting with the next one. Well, it's not sure yet. They voted on it yesterday, so we'll talk about it after the break. But, Duane, all signs lead to Patrice Bernier signing a new contract with the Montreal Impact today, just reported by TVA Sport a few hours ago. So, Patrice Bernier, the captain, back with the Montreal Impact for what is right now at least one season for sure.
Yeah, that's a good move for the club and for him. Obviously, he enjoys it great there. I think he's at the stage of his career where he's going to be getting one-year contracts back to back to back until he's done. But doesn't seem to have a sign of slowing down. He was a very big part of the Montreal success in the playoffs, I thought. Leadership is undeniable there, especially if any of the rumors are coming true about them maybe needing to have some kind of transition. I think it's important to have the stability of having Bernier in there. The one question I have with Bernier being back for another year is, do you consider him for a Gold Cup roster in the summer? Is that something that is still on the radar, or do you go completely young? And I'm of two minds of what Canada should do in this Gold Cup. Lots of time to figure that one out, though, Kevin.
Oh, yeah, we do have a lot of time, and we have a roster of the Canadian men's national team with the camp as well. We'll talk after the break, so we'll take a break and be right back.
You are listening to Soccer Today, live on SPN Radio. Visit sportspodcastingnetwork.com for more.
So, Duane, just before we tease about the World Cup, we'll get to it. But Canada has announced today its roster for their annual January camp in the United States. And the roster is quite interesting to me. A lot of young, either Major League Soccer club player or product that have moved on, like we met, and Tissot and Becker, but still a lot of names that we are familiar with in this camp.
Yeah, look, there's only so much depth in the program, so there's only so many turnover you can do. I mean, it's not like I joked and called it camp Timbit before, but I mean, there's only some of you're still going to have to dip into your donuts a little bit to have a camp in Canada, because there's not enough Timbits out there, unfortunately. And until there's another level to sort of draw from, I think that's going to be the case. Looking at this real quickly, I mean, obviously, I think here in where I am, there's the 6 TFC players, including, should I say it? Should you give me a drum roll?
Drum roll.
Mobabuli!
Mobabuli called up Anthony Jackson, Amal Wandre Lefebvre, Maxime Tissot, Carl W. Wimet, Ashton Morgan, Jordan Hamilton. A lot of names that we are familiar with that have been either product of the academies of the MLS teams, Marco Bustos, Carducci. So a lot of players that we are familiar with that literally have grown up the last few years in the ranks of the academies of the MLS teams.
Yeah, it's not surprising to me. These guys are going to get a look because they're it's not surprising they're going to get a look because they're looking to look at everyone at this point, right? And that's just the situation there. I mean, looking overall at the roster, though, Osorio getting another fair look on this, and at this point in time, I think if Jonathan Osorio doesn't continue to get call-ups after this, then I think maybe the narrative about him, Floro having an agenda against him will have to go out the window, and perhaps we'll have to look at Jonathan Osorio himself, whether he's the one that's there. This is a very young lineup. They're playing a team that's relatively weak, though, so I think that this is a great idea to sort of bring these guys in here. Only looking only only 4 guys on Unattached FC, 5 guys on Unattached FC this time. So that's something as well. So hopefully Unattached FC can continue to thrive, Kevin.
Well, yes, a player like Tisa, we met, and others that are looking for a job in Major League Soccer or potentially in the NASL. And that's the thing with a lot of teams in the NASL needing a lot of players in the next few weeks. A lot of players will find jobs that don't have one right now. So at least there's a positive. Now we're going back to 48 teams in the World Cup. Maybe Canada will be one of those 48. Who knows? It'll be interesting. But Duane, our beloved groups of 3 are back.
Yeah. Real quickly before we get into the World Cup, I did want to note that there was a press release that went out just a few minutes ago that said that there will be some major Canadian women's retirement announcements coming down the pipe on Friday. We all kind of have an idea who that might be. They're playing that game in February as a goodbye for some of these players, and then they suspect that they will get younger there. Shane Caretti, I'm sure, is one of them that will get the full write up there. My question is whether Matheson might join her. I could see that happening. Players that are on the wrong side of 30 now, but at any rate, that's another thing there. Back to the World Cup. Look, this is, to me, there's a lot of people that are complaining about this. To me, complaining about an expansion of an event that we all enjoy greatly every 4 years is the ultimate first world problem in a lot of ways, right?
I'm giving you more of what you love and you're complaining?
Yeah. And look, you'll note that most people that are complaining live in countries that get to the World Cup every year. It's the idea behind it is, look, we can speak purely from a Canadian perspective here, but I'm not even, let's even go beyond that. There's a lot of good countries out there that get left out each year. And I think that FIFA looks at this, and yes, there's a monetary aspect up to it. I think that I saw a New York Times article expected there'd be another $1 billion in revenue.
Of profit, it's here. The revenue, we're going to increase to a estimate of 5.29 billion pounds for a 48 teams World Cup, and the profit rise will go from of 521 million, so it will get close to $1 billion of profit. It is a monetary aspect to it, yes, but what we talk about, the tournament bracket, a 32 team knockout stage, 32 team bracket with upsets here and there. There's bound to be at least one magic of the cup kind of way. And that could be interesting too. And then I started thinking about it, groups of 3, top 2 moves on. You got your 32 teams, you make a bracket, and may the best team win. And you know what? It's only 7 games still for the winner and the runners up, like in the normal World Cup. And kind of be interesting. I was like, well, that actually might work.
Yeah, and look, the idea that the World Cup format sacred is a bit ridiculous. The current the format that I'll be in for, I guess, 2 more has only been in place since 1998. Prior to that, there were 24 teams in there, and they had third place finishers getting through. I guess the one thing with the 13 groups is at least you don't have third place finishers going through. Although, as I said to you off air, Kevin, we are very likely going to have the scenario of Team A beats Team C, Team B beats Team A beats Team C, Team B beats Team A, and Team C beats Team A. Right? Does that work? Anyway, you know what I'm trying to say. You're gonna
all
have
team will be
1-1,
and it's a draw, and it can be goals equal and everything equal all across the board. Yeah, that's a possibility.
Yeah, we've seen it in the Gold Cup. I mean, famously, Canada won a couple lots, and I'm sure that it's not going to be too many World Cup cycles until someone wins the lot. And I mean, maybe this is like 48 is like they'll do it for one cycle, and then we might as well just add 16 more teams, and then you
let's go to 75. Why not?
Yeah, then you're getting a bit into the theater of the absurd. Well, look, I don't have an issue with more teams in. I don't, because I live in a country that doesn't get there. So obviously, I'm happy with more opportunity to get to the show. And you may say that's watered down, and you'd say that correctly. Of course, it's watered down. But if you really just wanted the best tournament, then screw it. Just have a showcase between the European and South American teams. But where's the fun in that?
Hey, we're not saying that Canada's going to win it, but we might be in it actually. So being in it, it's part of the fun. And doesn't matter if we lose 5-0 to Spain. We're not going to play against them anyway. So no, I see what you mean, and it could be interesting because you might not win the whole thing. But maybe you're gonna make a run to the quarters because you made an upset in the round of the 8 to 16. So you never know what's gonna happen, and that's kind of like what they want to bring to it: the beauty of a cup tournament mixed with a group stage.
Yeah, and look, you get a situation right now where the same teams win over and over again. Outside of France's single win in there, it's primarily the major countries win. And I'm not going to say that that's not going to change, but I do think you have an opportunity with a bigger bracket to have like March Madness, like a bracket buster. The big teams still usually win March Madness, right? Your North Carolinas, your Dukes, they generally, Kentucky, Kansas, they usually win them.
It's not always number one, but it's like always a top 4 team usually, yeah.
Yeah, but you still also get deep runs every year where some team grabs a hold of the attention. You're, like Iceland in the Euros. That happens more often the larger the bracket. And all it would take, the way that these things are set up, is for one major upset to happen. So Italy to have a tough game in the round of 32, and then suddenly that quadrant of the bracket is wide open. You look at it and go, oh my God, like Japan could make the semifinals or whatever, like a decent team, but a team you never would have expected. And that's kind of fun. And that's what makes sports kind of entertaining. Ultimately we are talking about sports here, folks, not, serious world issues. So the fact that we're just going to have a little more fun and probably another week of the tournament isn't the worst thing. I do worry about player safety and stuff like that when we're overextending them, but this is the World Cup.
But it will be for the players, it's the same because you take one game away of the group stage and you add a knockout stage. So you don't guarantee one for the runner-up and the winner. It's still 7 games. So you don't add any game. You actually subtract a game to many teams because if they don't make it to the group stage or get knocked out to the first round, it's like a 4-team group. So you're not adding games to any player. There's going to be 80 total games instead of 64, but still 7 games for the winner and the runner-up, and that is what you want. You don't want to suddenly put a burden as well. And it's going to last 32 days a month, so it's not even going to be longer than the 32-team World Cup because you take one group stage game away, having a 3-team group stage instead of having a 4-team group stage.
And there'll be less dead rubbers in it, for sure. The situation now is you generally, in each final segment of games, there'll be usually a handful, 3-4, that don't really mean anything. You watch them anyway because they're World Cup games, but they don't mean anything other than pride. I suspect that every game in that group stage will have some meaning. Whether it's for seeding, whether it's for whatever. And that's the other thing too. You're going to want to, I think it will force teams to, and this is just speculation, but I think it will force teams to play a little bit more offensively minded because when you're such tight with 3 games, you're going to, if you're up a goal, say, you're up 1-0 and you're playing a weaker team and you're the stronger team, you might say to yourself, you know what, I need to make sure that I get up to 2 goals and maybe even 3 goals because the goal diff could matter if we have a slip up in the other game. And we don't want to get that second seed in that for that round of 32 because, like I said, your bracket's going to matter. And you're going to, if you're a top team, you're going to want to go in, set into your quadrant bracket where you're the number 1 seed, the top team sort of looking to get to that semifinal. So I think it might add a little spice that way. We have, lots of time to speculate about this. It's 2026. It's not going to happen to you. The other thing, to get it hyper local for a second, what does this mean for Canada? Look,
technically, I guess more chance to get there, I guess.
Yeah, by 2026, if the Premier League starts as you think, and it's had time to grow and give more players opportunity. The homegrown rule in Canada and the Generation Adidas rule and all that sort of stuff, I think, continually yield. I do think, as I've said many times, as bleak as it looks on the surface, you have to remember that a country's national team performance is reflective of what their development programs were a decade prior, not necessarily what they are now. And I do think there have been improvements in the last 5 years or so that will start to yield moving forward. So this is a long-winded way of me saying that I don't think it's that absurd to think that Canada could qualify for a 48-team World Cup on its own merits in 2026. I think what's even less absurd is that because this is going to require a lot of venues, that Canada might get a host spot. because it might be in there as a co-host with the
Yeah.
U.S. or a co-host with the U.S. and Mexico.
Yeah, that's
And
always a
that-
possibility. Yeah,
We're going in as hosts. We're going in. Okay, never mind.
as long as we're going
Now
in,
you're gonna-
whatever,
Yeah.
whatever it takes.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever it does take at this point in time.
But if you're looking at me, any possibilities? If you're looking at the goal of Gianni Infantino and FIFA, the one stage is very long and takes a long way to get there. It's a qualifying process for the World Cup. If you can reduce the qualification process a little bit by having more teams in and making the actual final bigger, which actually is your drive to revenue, as a business person, that's what would make more sense. And 48 teams World Cup is maybe a step in that direction.
Yeah, no, and I was thinking that as well. That this might reduce the qualifying campaign, make it a little less grueling. Especially for the bigger clubs in some ways. And I suspect that was the sort of bigger countries I meant. I suspect that that's what was they used as the carrot for them, is that they will be in groups that will allow them more flexibility, which perhaps will allow them to be more expansive in their roster choices during the qualification campaign, which will ultimately put less strain on their resources and less strain on their top players. And I think that is a benefit that shouldn't be understated, because if you have less strain on your top players, that should result in a better performance by them when it matters most.
Yeah, exactly. Duane, let's take a quick break, come back with a Bits and Bytes. The Bits and Bytes on Soccer Today. St. Clair, January 20th in Ottawa. And you can get their single cheating everywhere. Duane, we're yesterday, speaking of cheating, Khadija Buchanan is going to an APDNA, so we talked about it yesterday on the show. But I want to have your thoughts as well on what's almost an exodus of the top players in North America to the Women's League in Europe.
I think it's a good thing. I think that exposing players out of their comfort zone is going to make them better. So I applaud the Canadians' decision to avoid the NWSL, to try and push themselves and challenge themselves in a new culture and a new part of the world. And I think that it's refreshing for me to see this. And I think it also speaks well to the continued evolution of the French Women's League, which I believe to be the best women's league in the world now. And I think that having a couple Canadians playing in that league is only going to make them better players. So I think it's a great thing. And as I said the other day when we talked about this, it's also by virtue of Buchanan and Lawrence making that decision, they are going to open up the potential for the CSA to provide the allocation spot in the NWSL that they would have gotten, and they absolutely for sure would have gotten an allocation spot, to another player that they then maybe can use to add depth. And I hope the CSA doesn't take the cheap route when it comes to that and just not allocate a player, because they aren't fully allocated at the moment. I think with so many young players coming through the system that there's no excuse to not fill those full 16 spots in the near future. And as I said, if you take some of those top players out, then all it can do is build you more depth. And I think that depth is good.
After months of speculation and reporting here on SPN, it is now official. The TV rights of Major League Soccer in Canada are set until 2021 in French, and up until I think maybe a season earlier in English, Duane. And it is and it isn't what we have said before. RDS have lost the entire MLS package. It is officially TVA Sport, which is the French official broadcaster, not just for the Impact, but for the entire league, with the playoff, with the All-Star game, with every coverage, with a special show weekly, with talking about more in the entire league than just the Impact in the past. Now that will be the case in TVA Sport and used with the entire platform of Québécois Media. So that is interesting. And in English, well, it is TSN. And the Impact coverage in English will be not a lot. The way it was said is a lot of Vancouver, TSN, TFC game, and some Impact game. And, of course, the All-Star game, playoffs. And special, but now there will be a Friday slot and a Sunday slot on TSN as well. So Soccer Night in Canada is potentially still alive as well.
Yeah, look, and that's the other mystery is what the CBC's little move there is about, and it's going to get people speculating that maybe it's related to the Canadian Premier League again. I think maybe that's wishful thinking, but nonetheless, it's something that you could speculate on. In terms of the TSN deal, I am pretty convinced, based on the people that I talked to, that this was all but dead about 4 months ago until the playoffs happened and they started to see the potential, and there was a reconsideration that happened there.
And the French side would have been dealt before. Sorry to interrupt, Duane, but I'm saying because RDS was usually linked with TSN, how they got contracts together. And the fact that TVA Sport got the French version and TSN, their English rival counterparts, got the English version, maybe mean that a different timing, different proposition were accepted on either side.
Yeah, look, obviously getting, all of the Whitecap games have always been on TSN, and I think it's done them quite well and extended their brand and their reach in Western Canada very well. TFC has kind of always split it. This year they'll all be on TSN, and that's probably for the benefit, to have habits form in terms of where to find this. It's also great when you don't have to call up bars and figure out whether they have 360 or World. You can just go and know that they'll have TSN. So that's a benefit too. I mean, the TV numbers, I don't know what kind of bump they're going to get from that playoff run. I suspect that they'll probably do okay on the first game, but generally speaking, I suspect that they'll fall back down to their normal level again. But another playoff run, and TSN knows, and they probably suspect that they think Vancouver will have a bounce back. I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's probably the thinking, and they probably believe, logically speaking, the TFC will have a similar season. So the regular season is a loss leader for them to get to those playoff numbers again. It's all about those.
But not just that, Duane, I think as well in the wording of the press releases is the increased coverage multi-platform as well from TSN will be interesting, because if you put more behind the product and build it up, the game could be bigger. The viewership, the audience could grow quicker. And we'll see if they use the famous CFL model that have been using for a decade to maybe not that extent, or wishful thinking to that extent. But if they get behind the league as a league and not just for them Canadian club, there's some potential there as well to grow. So more people could watch maybe on a Friday night, New York versus New York on TSN than in the prior years. Those are the games you want to grow as well, not just the Canadian matchup, but the Friday night specials or the other game that you want to grow an audience. And now it's just going to be TSN as well. You can grow the habit of your audience. Okay, MLS, it's on TSN, it should be playing, and play not just the Canadian matchup, but play other games. Example, like a famous Friday night New York FC versus Red Bulls, right? So always you want to build that audience of hardcore soccer fans, even if it's not just Canadian.
Yeah, and look, you mentioned the CFL model, and for American listeners that are, or non-Canadian listeners anyway, that are listening out there that aren't familiar with that, the CFL was pretty much dead and buried in the 90s, and then TSN got the rights for nothing, basically, and they made it a product. They made it they gave it a solid time period that was theirs, Friday Night Football. They created packaging around it, a lot of led off the sports centers and things like that, and by doing that, they created a habit in people that they would just, they're football fans, mostly in the prairies, but whatever, they're football fans. They'd get home from work on a Friday and they'd flip their TV on and they'd just watch whatever was on there. They didn't care that it was Argos Ticats. They were Rough Riders fans. They were going to watch it because it was just the sport that they watched and the league that they watched. With two teams involved.
And to a level to scout the opposition of your team for next week. And that's what you want to build up to. If you know the Montreal Impact or TFC or Vancouver is playing prime time next week versus New York, and the week prior you can showcase New York versus another team, and those are the possibilities you can do as well to build up, to make that weekly, to make that week-to-week drama, to create it like a narrative, a storyline, an arc that you can link from week to week, game to game. And that's interesting what you can do with that.
Yeah, and exactly, and through after a few years of that, they no longer needed to push it as hard because that was just, it became, one of their core products. Now, the TV numbers are falling, but the TV numbers are falling across the board in all sports, simply because of changing dynamics and how people watch TV. I think there's the same amount of people watching; they're just not getting counted. If you follow,
and in all sports, in all of TV, basically, sports per statistics are one of the categories that is not declining as fast because there's something about live sports that cannot be recreated with DVRs and Netflix of this world. Outside of that, the numbers are dropping drastically.
oh yeah, well, I mean, not to go out of the world, but I was listening to a Doctor Who podcast the other day, and their Christmas special received basically like 2/3 of the ratings that the top rated one would have like 7 years ago. But no one's worried about it because that's just the reality. They're still basically in the same sort of relative place that they were, right?
No one's worried about it because people bought it on iTunes, people watched it on YouTube, and people downloaded 5,000 times on the pirated website. So if you add all the viewership all together, there might be even more. So that's reality.
Yeah, and you have to find other ways. Well, just to talk in general, I think that's the key. They're finding new ways to make revenue, product placement, things like that. And I think sports will end up doing the same thing. There's controversy in the NHL because they're going to add advertising on their shoulder pads. Well, it's just going to get more and more. Soccer's already sort of ahead of the curve there. I suspect we'll see more advertising on the jerseys in the days ahead. I think we'll see more advertising, maybe even embedded, on the screen while you're watching and things like that because they're going to need to find revenue.
On soccer, it's already the case. When you watch it, if you behind the goal and all those CGI fake banners that are put on during games internationally, like it already has started. And just my video game world, when you're playing games like NHL online, on the boards you have Netflix commercials for Luke Cage. So it actually blended into virtual life as well. The product placement there to help appease some costs.
Yeah, it's all going to be creative and different in the days ahead. I think some of the advertising techniques and things that they use in the near future, I think we probably even some smart marketer out there is thinking of them, but we aren't, and we're going to be surprised by them when they happen. But
and you know what? You're probably going to be able to become a subscriber or membership. That if you have that, you pay I don't know $20 a month, and you press the button ad free, then it removes all the ad of your sports if you want, but you need to pay for it now.
Yeah, you can see something like that. I could also see them using augmented reality in some way, that you wear the glasses and they somehow incorporate stats and things like that. I could totally see them doing that, and that would all be sponsored, of course. It's interesting stuff, but nonetheless, it weighs away yet, Kevin.
But it'll be interesting too, because if you go back to let's go back to TV rights for a second, the timeline of it as well. TVA Sport getting the rights was Sportsnet in the running up until the end, and TSN were maybe the higher chairmen of TSN seen the viewership of the play. I'd be like, okay, we have to do something. We can't just lose it. And just won the English rights, but the French one were already decided and already sold to somebody else. It's interesting too, because usually it's a package deal. If you're looking at hockey or soccer in the past, TSN, RDS are together. Sportsnet, TVA Sport have their own partnership together for the content. Now we're seeing something different where RDS lost the product, TVA Sport has gained one, TSN has kept them and taken one away from Sportsnet. So now it's fascinating to see too if TSN is gonna sublet games now too, when they do with the Premier League rights, another famous product they have. So no, it is set in stone, but how the execution of those TV rights that were decided today, that's what's interesting to me next few months.
Yeah. So, well, what happens to Sportsnet and their soccer companies? They're getting less and less and less of it. I worry for guys like James Sharman's and that. They do good work there, but increasingly TSN seems like the place to be if you want to cover this sport in this country, Kevin.
The Soccer Network?
Well, that's what in the early days, you're too young to remember it. They used to, because the Canadian Soccer League was on there when TSN was launching it. They used to use a lot of filler program. It was like kind of highlight shows from Europe and the Canadian Soccer League and stuff. So a lot of people would derivatively call it the Soccer Network. So I'm okay if it goes back to that, though. I don't think it'd be as derivative nowadays.
Exactly. Anything else you wanted to talk about in the Bits and Bytes today, Duane?
No, I mean, I'm thinking off the top of my head. As I said, I don't know if we mentioned the African Cup of Nations yet. Kevin and I are working on maybe finding a guest to cover that for us throughout the tournament. We are researching it ourselves so that we can provide you with a preview show on Friday. Obviously, as a daily show, we will delve into that quite a bit during the month that it runs. It's a strange little tournament that always surprises. Always interesting. Hard to watch over here, but we'll find a way. It's not going to quite be like what we did with Copa Centenario and the Euro. Obviously, we just simply don't have, especially with my new job, I simply don't have the time to watch every game. But I do well endeavor to find someone out there who is watching every game so that we can tap into their knowledge. And if you know someone out there, like even if you're maybe a student or something that's looking to get into broadcasting or interested in doing that for us, by all means, reach out and we'll have a chat. But that's kind of where I'm at right now in my headspace. We'll be there. And I'm in terms of timing for this show, Kevin, and the listeners, I am right now still going through a process of orienting myself into what I'm doing now and getting my new schedule. But I am working it out with my coworkers to do a split shift kind of so that we can consistently provide you with Soccer Today in the mornings. It might be 10 or hopefully 11, but it might be 10. We'll see moving forward, but that is the goal. I suspect that, I'm dedicated to give you this, but we're hopefully going to get it close to where it was before in terms of consistent timing, but it's going to be a week or so before that's consistent again, guys.
And until next time, have a great soccer. You were listening to SPN, the Sports Podcasting Network. Visit us, sportspodcastingnetwork.com.